Hey, it's Kelby. In this video, I'll show you how to enter your asset allocations into Rock My Retirement's 401k, IRA, and brokerage modules. Rock My Retirement allows you to have a different asset allocation in each account, and in any given account, you can set up to 3 different allocations for different phases of your retirement. Rock My Retirement will simulate your retirement's performance in each scenario using the allocations you set for each asset class based on historical growth rates for each class. Let's go over how these allocations work in the UI. By default, your assets get allocated 100% to cash. If you increase or decrease the allocation for any other asset class, Rock My Retirement automatically reduces the cash allocation so that all of the allocations add up to 100%. Once your cash allocation drops to 0%, you won't be able to increase any of the other allocations further because you can't have a total allocation of more than 100%. So you'll need to lower the allocation of one of your other asset classes so that there's a non-zero allocation in cash. And then you can increase whatever other allocation you like, which will pull that amount from cash. Now, there's one thing you should know about the historical data that Rock My Retirement uses for each asset class. Rock My Retirement models scenarios based on historical data going back to 1926. However, we don't have extremely accurate data for all asset classes going back that far. So, as a developer, I've had to do the best I can with what's out there. For example, the Russell 2000 is the index we use as the benchmark for small cap stocks, but it's only been around since 1984. We have some other indices before then, but prior to 1972, the information we have about small cap stocks is really bad. There was a researcher named Edwin McQuarrie who found that the small cap data prior to 1972 excluded 95% of all small cap stocks known to exist during that period. And most of the 5% that it did include were not even small cap companies. They were just former large cap companies that were struggling financially. So any data we use for small cap stocks prior to 1972 is not going to be useful for modeling performance of small cap stocks in your portfolio. We might as well just be using a random number generator. We have similar problems with other asset classes. So what do we do? Well, first of all, for any asset classes where we don't have good data, it is simply not responsible to model them. So as a result, you'll see that Rock My Retirement doesn't have an option for an asset class such as your art collection or for vacant land. There are many other asset classes that I won't be specific about, but let's just say there's some other retirement software out there that does try to model asset classes where the data is just too unreliable to be useful. So Rock My Retirement leaves those asset classes out entirely. But for ones where we do have some good data, like at least small cap stocks post-1972, we can also think about a different way to model their performance for scenarios that use data prior to 1972. For example, we know that small cap stocks generally don't track dollar for dollar with large cap stocks, but they do tend to move in the same directions, and there is a very high correlation. As a result, for years in which we don't have good data for small cap stocks, we can actually substitute data for large cap stocks in those years and still have something that is fairly useful. It's not ideal, but like I say, we do the best we can with what we've got. So I put that disclaimer out there because I want you to understand that we do the best we can, and Rock My Retirement only has asset classes where I think I can give you something useful, but there are some limitations. There's one more topic I want to touch on before I sign off. You may have heard of something called the 4% rule, or the 4% safe withdrawal rate. That comes from a seminal white paper written by a financial planner named Bill Bengen. Bill Bengen is quite literally a rocket scientist. Before he became a financial planner, he studied aerospace engineering at MIT, so he's a pretty bright fellow. Bill Bengen did some research and found that if you have an allocation of 60% large cap stocks and 40% bonds, that at any point since 1926, you could have retired and withdrawn 4% of your assets in the first year of retirement, and then increase the withdrawal amount by the rate of inflation for 30 years, and you wouldn't run out. Now, I want to point out that the type of bonds Bill Bengen was analyzing was 10-year treasury bonds. Rock My Retirement has those under the knob labeled treasuries. But Rock My Retirement also has another knob for corporate bonds. That's called corp bonds. That knob refers to something called BAA corporate bonds. Now, BAA bonds have a higher historical rate of return than 10-year treasuries, but they're also a lot more volatile and they carry more risk. I'm not suggesting you use one or another, but if you are thinking about the 4% rule, make sure you understand that corp bonds will not give you something that follows Bill Bengen's safe withdrawal rate. That requires the 10-year treasuries. Well, that wraps up this video on asset allocations. I hope that it helps you rock your retirement.